In the period before the Second World War, Brazil was still one of the top South American countries as it continued to industrialize faster than many of its Spanish-speaking neighbors. The main export of Brazil had actually shifted from sugar to large amounts of coffee during this time. This emphasis on cash crop production will come back to bite Brazil later as the war starts. Political leadership at the time is Getulio Vargas, after he is placed in the presidential office by a military coup in 1930. Vargas stayed in power as a dictator, president, and senator for 24 years, seeing Brazil through the war and for the time immediately after. Despite their sudden difference in the type of presidents, Brazil relied heavily on the United States during this time. Also, despite assisting the Allies in the fight, Brazil also received large amounts of flack for allegedly being open for Nazi officers to hide in Brazil to escape the punishment for their war crimes after the World War ended. Brazil's economy was closely tied to the United States'. After switching from sugar to coffee as their major export, Brazil was in danger when the war broke out because coffee is a luxury that the U.S. could do without, as it is not essential to the wartime economy, and the United States could find cheaper coffee or grow it herself. This means that Brazil had to keep the interests of the Americans in order to convince the Northerners that Brazil was an ally they did not want to lose. Politically, Brazil had strayed from their shared form of governments with the United States after the military coup that instated Vargas in power. However, during the war, Brazil did host a number of United States bases and still relied on the Americans for general protection. Brazil played a unique role during the Second World War. In order to secure its position as the United States' good friend in South America, it harnessed itself to the United States war machine and began to provide the United States with raw materials such as rubber and timber. On top of this, Brazil also hosted numerous United States naval bases and participated in a Southern Atlantic naval campaign to aid against the German U-boats. On top of their previous feats, Brazil actually had boots on the ground, the only other country besides the United States, Canada, and Mexico in the Western Hemisphere to do so. Brazil assisted the United States soldiers in their Italian campaign and actually greatly contributed. Brazilian soldiers had been recorded taking many Axis prisoners of war, and this combat experience allowed for them to use their professional military and gain wartime fighting experience. Brazil suffered minimal casualties as their few but skilled soldiers helped open up the soft underbelly of Hitler's Fortress Europe. Overall, Brazil was not a major participant in the war, as she didn't send all troops, enact a draft, or make life-altering changes to the home front, but still nonetheless contributed more than many of its South American neighbors. After World War II, many German officers and officials were prosecuted and convicted of their war crimes. This took place in an event called the Nuremberg Trials, where 12 high-ranking Nazi officials had been condemned to hanging. However, some sought refuge in South America. It is true that one of the countries they fled to was Brazil, including the most famous Angel of Death, Joseph Mengele. This Nazi doctor committed many horrific medical tests and experiments on prisoners in the Auschwitz concentration camp, and had ran and hid in Brazil, along with a few others that they hid in Brazil and had to recreate their lives. However, these men had to sneak into Brazil, whereas it is believed that other Nazi officials received aid when fleeing to other South American countries such as Argentina and Chile. It is rumored that supporters of Argentina's President Juan Perón had provided some fleeing Nazis with money, and the officials would actually live out their lives under their original name in Argentina. This event led to many in the United States to believe Brazil had welcomed the Germans. However, Brazil, again unlike Argentina, did not welcome them, and they could not live under their original name for fear of being found. This stigma of sympathy for Nazis kept with Brazil despite Vargas's decrees to ban Nazism in Brazil. This led to later help sever ties with the United States later in the 20th century, as in President Ernesto Geisel severed Brazil's alliance with the United States in 1977. This marked the end of the past friendship the United States and Brazil had. Currently, people still view Brazil as a sanctuary for fleeing Nazis, where their neighbor Argentina is more worthy for blame in this matter. Overall, Brazil contributed much during World War II. They sent over troops to fight in the Italian campaign. They hosted United States naval bases and participated in a South Atlantic naval campaign. However, because of the actions of a few high-ranking Nazi officials that fled to Brazil, they were left with the stigma that during this time they opened their borders for these Nazi officials and welcomed them to escape their punishment.